Well, welcome back to Conversations. I'm Josh Wood, and I'm so excited that you've decided to come back and join us for another episode as we discuss the challenges of life and ministry in this world of COVID-19. Today, I'm actually super excited. I've got two people that I am just stoked to have been able to find some time to sit down with and have a discussion with. I've got Kaleb Eisele from Humans of Adventism and also Justin Khoe, who was that Christian vlogger who's now transitioning into something a little bit different. So why not sit back and enjoy this conversation with Kaleb and Justin.
All right, guys, welcome. I've got both Kaleb Eisele and Justin Khoe here. These guys have, I suppose, a following in their own rights. They've got a little bit of history with all sorts of things. But today what we want to talk about is how COVID-19, the coronavirus, is affecting people who work in social kind of media, the gig economy. Both of you guys have got ample loads of experience of working with people, and you've kind of come to a point where that's stopped. So, Kaleb, maybe if we start with you, can you maybe just, for those who don't know you, because we were just talking now before we started recording that you clearly have more of a profile perhaps in North America. So do you want to introduce yourself to the people over this side of the world in Australia?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Kaleb Eisele. I live in the Portland, Oregon area in the United States. I am self-employed, but the main conference or the main contract that I have is working for the Oregon Conference here in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, my job is making things for the internet, and the angle that I've taken is interviewing Seventh-day Adventists about life experiences. So what that looks like, it looks like a picture of them on your Facebook or Instagram showing up, and then, a concise story about something that they've lived through. I do about 4 of those every week, 2 for Oregon and 2 through a platform called Humans of Adventism. And Humans of Adventism, I operate independently, so you do tend to see a lot of kind of topics talked about there that you might not see at church, and that's been important to do that. But really, it's all of this is centered around telling the stories of other people and connecting with them, and then connecting them to people who can get a minute to see through their perspective.
Cool. I'll come back to ask you a question on that. But Justin, yourself, I met you probably 2.5-ish years ago at a digital discipleship conference because you were the digital discipleship go-to. What's your story? How are you kind of the go-to person for digital stuff now?
Yeah, my name is Justin Khoe, and for the last about 4 years or so, I've been running a YouTube channel. Initially started off as a channel called That Christian Vlogger, where I was teaching people about the Bible, spiritual disciplines, commonly asked questions about the Bible, things of that sort. As of late, I've transitioned a little bit differently. I've expanded into podcasting as well. And my subject of conversation has been less of talking to people, and now it's talking with people. And so rather than trying to talk to Christians about what they should say to their non-Christian friends and try and spread the gospel vicariously in that way, my platform now is hosting conversations with the spiritually curious. A lot of times that's with people who hold a different worldview than myself. Sometimes they are Christian, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're very outside of the not Christian bubble. An episode that I'll be uploading in the next couple of days is an episode I did with my barber here in the Portland, Oregon area, who at the time of the shooting was pagan. And so I'm having a lot of those types of conversations on the internet now, talking with the very people that we have been called to reach the entire time.
All right. I'll just ask a question straight to you, Justin, on that.
Sure.
I've heard about this barber. I've listened to a number of podcasts that you've kind of spoken about this guy on. But the thing that's changed with what you do, you said you're talking kind of to people, now talking with people. We're in this self-isolation kind of world now. Your podcast YouTube channel now is called I'm Listening. oftentimes you're sitting across the table from someone having a conversation. How are you adjusting to not sitting across the table from people having those conversations?
Yeah, that's a good point. That is one of the values of the show, such to the extent that I'll literally fly different parts of the country or fly people to me in order to have that face-to-face conversation. I have not yet, and I'm trying my best to stick to my guns as far as not doing any digital kind of conversations, these pseudo relationships. One of the goals that I have with every one of my guests is to try and foster a longer term relationship with these people. And so for a lot of them, even though my barber's episode hasn't even aired yet, I've known him for well over a year and a half now, it seems like. It's been quite some time. And we're still friends. I just saw him and his girlfriend just a couple of days ago at the park, respecting social distancing, of course. So it has been challenging. Thankfully, I have, 4 or 5 episodes that we haven't released yet. And since I'm releasing one major episode per month, I haven't quite yet run out of footage. But how it's been impacting me personally, it's a little bit challenging, but there's a lot of other ways to foster that relationship and to still connect with people. I found it as a really good time for right now to do homework and to listen to other interviews and other subjects and kind of just do research out there of, well, who else is out there? What views do they have, and why do they believe what they believe, and what can I learn from them? And so I've been taking it as just a season of consuming content of other people's stuff.
Okay, that's interesting because I'm a massive podcast listener,
Mhm.
but I've noticed that in this coronavirus world, podcast listening statistics have gone down drastically because we're used to multitasking, and we'll listen to the podcast when we're at the gym or when we're going for a walk or when we're driving. So you're essentially deliberately, intentionally bucking that trend and using the opportunity to upskill and get more information. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I am trying to do that more. Thankfully, I found on Facebook Marketplace one of those treadmill desks nearby. And so I purchased a treadmill desk. And so I've been actually walking like 5 or 6 miles, maybe 10 kilometers a day, just at my desk, listening to content, watching YouTube channels and things like that. And so I've been trying to stay fit. I'm like, okay, during coronavirus, I'm not getting any more out of shape. I'm actually going to use it to strategically. And so I've been multitasking in that sense. But yeah, I usually would listen to a lot of stuff anyways because of commuting time or going to the gym or running errands and stuff like that. So I'm still trying to keep that as part of my regular schedule.
Cool. So Kaleb, coming back to you, so Justin's
Mhm.
obviously got this interview style where he'd be across the table from someone. He's got some content there that's backing him up for probably 5 or 6 months.
Yep.
How is that different to your situation? Is that different to your situation? Because you're releasing 4 profiles a week, 2 on Humans of Adventism, 2 on Humans of Oregon. Do you have a backlog of people? How do you connect with people and still get those stories and still get those photos?
Yeah, I think the photos are the biggest challenge, but this is really a throwback to the world that I started in. So I started in a place where I was working overtime literally every week. Like the ability for me to travel to someone and interview them was just not going to happen. So, and I couldn't, honestly, I was working in a lot of like loud environments too. So I couldn't do phone calls where I felt like professional if I did it, right? And so I used a ton of Messenger. Now I've started kind of in the past year getting into like I meet people in person, and that's been new to me. So now that I've had to return to the original, like I'm approaching this from a much more experienced standpoint. Like I know kind of what works and what doesn't in the like recording phone calls and scheduling them and going through that kind of interview process and transcribing that. So I wouldn't say it's been bad. I do think that the picture situation is a little harder. But one thing that I've found is that like right now families are quarantined together. And so I've been able to rely on the skills of even people's kids. Like somebody in that household a lot of times is the technologically minded person, and they can get a photo for me. So it's really just about kind of working with each person and finding out that situation. If they have something that already works, great. But in some ways, I would say more people have time to do an interview in the middle of the day than before. And honestly, I think a lot of people want that outlet. It's like, especially for people who are going stir crazy, who are feeling isolated, they just want somebody to talk to. And it's less like I'm intruding on their life when I ask to spend an hour on the phone with me. And we've really taken, in both Humans of Adventism and Oregon Adventist Stories, we've taken time to talk to people about what's going on right now. And generally, I don't have that luxury. Like, people, they don't feel like what they're going through right now is that deep. It's a lot of real long ago past experiences. But right now, just asking people, how has your life changed over 1 month, is a huge thing that people need to be able to talk about. Like, people are going to need therapy from this. This is a time when people are losing their jobs. They're having to become homeschool parents. They're having to just shift the way they do things a lot. And so I don't know that the change is necessarily a detraction from what's going on. I do hope things go back to, where I can meet somebody in a coffee shop, see them face to face. But I think that we have a unique opportunity, and we just need to be able to recognize what we have to work with and, do that well.
Now, you guys, Justin, I don't recall you saying this, but you're also living in and around the Portland area. Is that right?
I say I'm from Portland just because that helps people understand where I'm at. I'm technically in Vancouver, Washington, which is really confusing because there's Vancouver, Canada, a little bit further north. So like, there's this whole ongoing conversation that I usually get to avoid if I just simply say I'm from Portland.
You guys then, because you're in the same area, you're both kind of creatively minded, and I don't want to cheapen the idea of being a creative, because I think that can be done. But you both have very different ways of being kind of creative. So
Yep.
Justin, you're more YouTube-esque. Kaleb, you're more Facebook, Instagram in the way you do things. But because you're close together, you're both in the same circles, you guys actually beginning to collaborate on some things as well. Is that right? Do you want to share a little bit about what's happening in that space and what is not happening because you can't continue to meet together?
Yeah. So actually, it's funny. Historically, I have not defined myself as a creative person. Like, I've seen those diagrams in the past before, where it's like left brain and right brain, and one half of the brain is really colorful and artistic, and the other one's like really nerdy and numbers oriented.
That's me.
Yeah, that's me too. I'm the numbers nerdy. Like, I've never taken a drawing class or an art class or any of those kinds of things. I've always looked at those kinds of activities as just completely out of the realm of what I was capable of doing. And so when I stumbled onto the YouTube side of things, people kept calling me a creative. You're a creative. Oh, what is it like to be a creative, and what it's like to spread the gospel through creative ministry? I'm just like, I don't really think that I'm creative. And
you're like, I nerded out on technology.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, I like cameras, I like toys, I like, all these data points and things like that. A lot of what I've been doing, have done, and am currently doing is actually really trying to partner myself up with creative, like legitimately creative people. Like, as a little behind the scenes thing, I just sent Kaleb over some mock-ups for merch that we're probably going to be launching for my new podcast, I'm Listening. I didn't design that. I just talk to my creative friends and try and provide for them opportunities and work for them. And so I'm always trying to surround myself with people who are better at the creative arts than I am, so that I can just allow them to shine. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that we definitely approach things differently. I approach things more from, oversight, big picture vision, as opposed to little details and things like that.
Okay. So what is it then that you guys are kind of collaborating on to bring the nerdy, analytical, big picture mind of Justin to perhaps the more creative? And Kaleb, do you consider yourself a creative?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm the type of person who has taken the art classes and has written like creative writing projects, and you know, I love, yeah, I definitely do consider myself creative. And I think that that's what's kind of worked really well in the past year and a half with us kind of coming together, is that we are so different in so many ways, and that's a great thing, right? Like it's not super helpful to bring someone who's exactly like you to help you on projects unless you're trying to get them to only do what you do. But to bring somebody who cares about the same things but has an entirely different skill set, that's a powerful, like, we're able to do things together that we couldn't do on our own. And I think Justin's really good at this, in just keeping a ongoing, revolving, tight network of people, and always kind of reaching out to connect with others that have these unique skill sets, these unique passions, but kind of the same people-centered, Christ-centered mission. If that makes sense. Yeah.
It's interesting, Justin, you and your wife, Emily, were just featured on an Instagram account over here in Australia called Waymaker. And one of the things that you guys both said there is that it's less about kind of, I'm paraphrasing, so this might not be 100% correct, but it's less about necessarily I like the person or I'm physically attracted to the person, but we have shared values. The beauty of the relationship between yourself, Justin, and some of the others you are working with is you're so different, but it's the shared value of,
yes,
let's just approach things together, even though we come at it from different angles and we've got different skill sets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Kaleb and I are very different in terms of personality, in terms of even the very stances that we take on religious or political things. But at the end of the day, we have the same goal in mind. We care about the same things. And because of that, I think it makes the project that we get to partner on together that much more powerful, because we get to take the best of what Kaleb has to offer, and we get to take the best of what I have to offer, and we get to merge those two things together and hopefully create something a little bit better as a result.
How does for lack of a better term, the photojournalist help with the podcast?
So I think one of the reasons why it's very, very helpful actually is because I don't work great with little details. I like to have the conversations. I like to play with these bigger ideas and the back and forth personal interaction. But when it comes down to actually whittling down as many as 4, 5, 6, 7 hours worth of interview content down to a 30-minute conversation, it's far too tedious for me to even pay attention to. Like, my ADD is so strong that I would never get through that episode. And so being able to sit and be fully present for the conversation, not stressing out about, oh my goodness, like, how do I chop up this entire thing? I would be in my own head and I wouldn't be able to create, in my opinion, as good of an interview. But knowing that someone with the storytelling and the attention to detail that Kaleb has is able to knit this entire thing together frees up a lot of the stress on my end of things, at least.
Josh, when you look at something like Humans of Adventism and you think about the person doing it, what do you think are the skill sets that are important?
Well, initially I would have thought you're hearing a story. And it's not as though you're sitting there with a dictaphone. It's an old term, your voice memo app on your phone, recording the story. Potentially you might be taking notes, but you're synthesizing their comments into a paragraph or two. So it's really just digging for nuggets that you want to show to everyone. So it's listening and synthesizing, and perhaps listening through the pretense of what they're saying to get to the depth of what they're saying. That's what I would say.
So that's what a photojournalism person brings to a podcast, right? This exact thing. How do you take something?
Answer my own question?
But I think that it's good for people to see us behind our work. If that makes sense. Like, people kind of get this impression that they're truly getting like a living room couch situation with the person they're reading about. right? That this person just said exactly that, and they're hearing it, and they started and stopped right where they started and stopped. Most people don't have that skill set. They're happy to talk about their life, and these are the things that they're saying, but finding a way to not just narrow it down, but have a strong starting and ending place, and a common thread throughout that makes it one story, it takes a lot of work. And beyond that, you have to make sure that the person, that it's still them, that it's still their voice, so that it's not a copied. Have you ever seen those like boards where they've copied and just cut out like words from different newspapers and made sentences out of them? That's an ethical nightmare of journalism, to have somebody do that with your story. So to be able to do that in a sensitive way, and to tell their story where they feel like they told it that way, and that's exactly what they were trying to say, is a skill. So that's kind of what I bring when I kind of collaborate with Justin. But on his end, I mean, he has just a wealth of knowledge in imagery and film and this kind of thing, and even confidence on camera or confidence speaking. These are things I've had to learn quickly and didn't get a lot of training for, because I didn't expect them. I didn't expect to need them. I started out just doing things you write and put out there, and I don't have to say anything to anybody.
Question for you both, and again, I don't mind who answers this to start with, but one of the things that we're finding now is that the church, and I say church, big C church, worldwide Christianity, where everyone's trying to live stream something in some way, and some are doing it poorly. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the funny side kind of things. Did you guys see the Anglican priest, I think it was, who was trying to run communion, and he had his candles on his table and he ended up burning his sleeve? I'll send that one to you. But we're needing these skill sets that you guys have more than ever. What's your commentary? What's your advice? What's your thoughts on where the church has been in relation to utilizing digital skills versus where it is now needing digital skills, and how they might best go about that?
Okay. So, I think that for a long time, if you think about somebody who's been in church for, say, 40 years, and all of a sudden 10 of those years is when, cell phones became something you use for more than talking. The internet is a daily household thing. It goes up from like an average use of maybe 2 or 3 hours in a day to almost constantly all day for some people. That changes happen really fast. And so if you're putting yourself in the shoes of somebody who's done things a certain way for decades, and then something new happens and you're expected to change all of that or significant portions of that, and people want it done right now, likely your view on that is going to be like, well, that's for young people, or that's a kind of a supplemental thing that we do, but it's not the main thing. And I understand why people feel the way that they do, but now what's happened is it's become a incredibly necessary thing. So when I started, some of my story is I started with a Facebook page for my local church, who was almost all senior citizens. Very few of them ever saw it, or they would just wanted to hear that it was doing good, and cool. But now all of them have to be doing church through Zoom. All of them have to be doing church through kind of live streams and everything. And so that thing that was a cool project for a young person now is a staple in their connection to their church family. I feel like I don't want to waste too much time talking about what the church has done wrong. in that, like, they could have adapted faster. Yes, they could have kind of listened to people who were saying, hey, this is important. But we're past that. What's happened has happened. And now, what I really want to view this time as is an opportunity where people have seen for themselves through their own experience the need for digital assets to church, and kind of the power that it has, the community connecting power that it has. And I'm thankful. I think that people have a different perspective when they have to use it and when they actually see it working for some reason with their own eyes than just being told about it.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, having churches and having people who are interested in growing, doing the work of going back on the backlog of 2 years, 3 years worth of articles and videos and podcast recordings that people like Justin and I and many others have been talking about, maybe even just starting way back and kind of getting kind of a ground level view of what's going on and kind of catching up from there would be helpful. Because I talked to the pastor this week, actually yesterday, and he was just talking about the struggle of it. Like, he is very comfortable at a pulpit. He's very comfortable looking at his members and talking to them and kind of that back and forth engagement of being on stage and all of that. And now he's trying to keep the same energy for a camera in his living room. And it's not the same process. But what he's found, and what I think many others are finding, is that it's not gonna be the same, and it shouldn't be the same. It's a whole different kind of realm of engagement and interaction that you can only reach through doing certain ways. Just like meeting in person has, pros and cons, meeting digitally has some of its own. And I just think that this right now is an opportunity for, if we haven't gotten there, to start. It's kind of expected now. And, the choice is, invest in digital communication or wait for weeks and weeks to connect with people.
Justin, you're the big picture person. Kaleb, you're the detailed person. So you synthesize things and make them look pretty, to oversimplify it. Justin, do things need to look pretty for an online church?
Yes and no. And like to the question, like, so I'm actually been thinking a lot about a different question, specifically how people like Kaleb and myself and yourself, Josh, how we will fit in with the Big C church after everything returns back to normal, whatever that looks like and whenever that is. What does it look like to try and communicate to a church culture that now has an idea of, this is how much work goes into creating a single YouTube video, a podcast, a live stream, fill in the blank, and is also really grateful that they no longer have to do it and can go back to regular churches. What is that conversation going to look like? I want to say that for the vast majority, probably 80-90% of the church pastors are going to be like, well, I'm glad, like, wipe their hands. I'm so glad that season of my ministry is over. I can go back to what I was trained for. But I think what's going to be really interesting is that the conversations that we have about media ministries can be radically different. The challenge of convincing an older generation of leaders that, hey, no, this is important. This makes a difference. This can really connect with people. That conversation's already done. But the question now is in the wake of all of this, well, how do we create systems so that our church as a whole, Big C, can actually minister effectively online as well as in person? Because the goal for all of us in the online creative ministry space has never been to replace everything that's happening physically with a digital version of it. Our goal has always been to integrate ourselves with the physical presence ministries of the church. How can we as creatives partner with our churches to actually amplify, so that way post-coronavirus, like, everything that's done as far as physical ministry as well as digital ministry is just accentuated because of this experience?
Now, you guys have been doing this for a number of years. I want to just shift gears from church side of things. How does work look? What does work look like for you. Kaleb, you're on a contract with the Oregon conference. Justin, are you really just kind of self-supporting in your online ministry? What does a shutdown, a stay-at-home order mean for you guys and your ability to actually continue to work and generate an income to pay those bills?
Yeah, so my role isn't as publicized as what Kaleb does, because Kaleb is actually creating content for a conference. And up until very recently, I was not creating content for a conference, but rather talking with the local pastors in this region and actually having these conversations of media ministry and training and providing insights and helping answering questions, whether it's technological or in regards to an algorithm or a platform. And so I actually do carry a contract with the Oregon Conference, where my role is to help answer these questions for local pastors about media ministry. I also carry a contract for the Florida Conference, and right now I've actually been in the middle of a series of videos for them, doing, I guess, a video-esque version of what Kaleb has been doing with Humans of Adventism. It is less of a testimonial. It's more of a human interest style, and for lack of a better term, it's an interview. It's like an interview style devotional. So I'm talking to people from all over the country and having them share their experiences and coalescing them into some type of a devotional style video. And then beyond that, I run my own shows. I have a handful of podcasts / YouTube channels that I manage. And so there's all the organization around that.
This tells me that you can't keep still and do one thing for too long, and you need to have a variety of stuff to keep yourself active and your mind going.
Yeah. That's very true. And also, like, I try to only do the parts of a project that I'm good at and that I enjoy doing. And then beyond that, I try and just simply give that work to other people. And so
this is interesting, because I think oftentimes when it comes to, say, media ministry, like, you need to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Or we get someone involved and expect them to know everything, rather than recognizing there's a different skill set for different aspects.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's so many different skill sets. To do an episode of any show that I've been doing now, it generally passes through 5 or 6 people's hands before it goes public. And so I didn't always have that luxury. I think to date, I've done well over 500 videos that are mostly like solo done. So if you translate to that, like a sermon at a pulpit once a week, that's about 10 years of preaching experience, but in its digital iteration. So I didn't always have this luxury to do it, but I haven't always had that privilege. But now, given that I have multiple different contracts, I've decided, rather than keeping the money for myself, I just simply try and create jobs for my creative friends. And so whether if that looks like hiring Kaleb as a story editor, or another friend as a videographer, another friend as a video editor, and fill in the blank. And so there's like multiple positions, even though it's really like a much smaller, I'm not making a lot of money out of it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I just simply cut up the pie and give it to other people, so that way I can have my input on multiple projects be what I can best bring to the table.
This is a great idea as well, because I think with the creative way of doing things, and I'm using that term probably incorrectly, almost like any industry, you've got to spend money to get good quality work done.
Oh, yeah.
And far too often, I think, when we have people who can take a picture, who can record something, who can edit something down, we're like, do this for free. This is for the church. This is ministry. But at the same time, I say this as a minister, pastors are paid. What's to say that the ministry of someone working in a creative space is any less important than what the pastor is doing? In fact, the reach potentially is even greater. Kaleb, I want to ask this question just on metrics. What would you say to people in this new world of running things online around the benefit of this new way of measuring, this new way of metrics? Because I imagine with what you do with Humans of Adventism, metrics is everything to some extent around how do you know that this is successful?
Okay, so the question is kind of like, what would I say about the value of digital work?
Yeah, and how we measure that.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception of people who aren't actively involved in this space that this would require a lot of new money to do. For, like, it's this nice thing that we wish we could add on maybe, but like we can't feasibly do that. For the price of paper, for example, if you look at how much our church spends on mailers, how much our church spends on lots of different types of promotional material, I think that looking at more efficient ways to do that and incorporating digital instead of physical would actually save us so much money that you could hire multiple people like Justin and I many times. If you
This
just
is actually
look
what
at
our conference did. Yeah, like our union, rather, I guess not conference, our union had a normal budget for their, I don't know if it was quarterly or monthly magazine. And they decided to cut that a little bit. And rather than just say, all right, publishing ministry, you lose on this budget, they said, we're going to reallocate this budget to create room for people who are interested in doing media ministry, digital media ministry. And that's actually how Kaleb and I got our contracts.
And the thing is, the ministry area is generally not publishing, it's communications, of which media ministry is a part. So it's just being repurposed.
Back to this question of the value of digital work, this is one of the cheapest things that the church can use that has some of the greatest impact. To grow something that people are engaging with every day or every week, that's not just another sermon or just another thing like we've been doing, but adding on to what we offer. And for less than we've spent on some of these other things. I think this is part of why I feel so strongly about it, is because it makes too much sense. It's not something that we have to go do a bunch of fundraisers for. It's right there, and all we really have to do is grab it and develop it and spend some time really dedicating our brain power and our resources to it. And it doesn't even mean that anything else has to close. You don't have to shut down something in order to do this. You just have to restructure what's there.
But I'm just going to ask you for final comments. I may try and see up a time that we can extend the chat in a couple of weeks or a couple of months' time, depending on how things go. But do you have any final comments, closing comments on the current state of the church with coronavirus, with this creative world, with the gig economy that you guys have kind of been a part of, and how you perhaps foresee things moving in the future? I'm not asking you to be a prophet, but I am asking you to think perhaps prophetically into the future a little bit. And Justin, you've touched on this a bit with, what things might look like when we go back to a level of normalcy. But what's your hope for the church moving forward after this isolation time?
I think I'll say this. Earlier on, I thought that the answer would be that the church hire me as a content creator. They give me a salary and I would create content for the church, much like hiring a digital evangelist or being a digital pastor of my own online congregation. And maybe that's something that needs to be explored. I think it is something that needs to be explored and will yield results in that respect. But I don't think that that's going to be the norm of how we integrate with the physical presence of the capital C church. I think what it looks like is finding creative individuals who have the ability to communicate effectively in this digital sphere and providing them partnerships with select churches and or select pastors. Maybe not every church, because I don't think every church warrants this type of partnership. I think the average church in Adventism might be 100, maybe 200, certainly not much more than 300, in attendance. But there are a couple outliers all throughout the world where there are handfuls of churches that are clearly thriving both in their message as well as the community that they're offering as well. I would love to see, what does it look like to supply those churches or those pastors with teams and with resources to help that message get communicated further and much and more effectively for cheap. What does it look like for for the world church to find people who have the skill sets like mine or like Caleb's, and then to connect us with those effective communicators so that we can actually do the thing that we do best while they get to do the thing that they do best. They get to worry about studying and communicating and creating community and in many ways focusing on a message for that Sabbath. And we could focus on how do we partner with them to get that message from the 500 who are in attendance to 500,000 people online. I think that that's something that we're going to have to look at. And I think that the whole gig economy really offers a lot of opportunities for those of us who are interested in creative ministry or just creative work in general. It wasn't seen as a blessing early on for maybe either myself or Caleb. The fact that we weren't full-time hires with a salary and benefits and all these things, but we just have a simple contract that for a modest amount with our church. But in hindsight, it's been great. It's been super awesome because what it means is we get to bring the best to our church. They don't have to look over our shoulders asking how many hours we've worked and all of these things. And so we're still serving the church in the way that we want to, as well as having the creative freedom to create content that we are proud of for ourselves that might push the bounds of what an actual church might be comfortable with doing. And so in the future, I see a lot of people with my skill set or Caleb's skill sets hiring themselves out to conferences under a contractor model and then becoming partners with in-person ministries.
Yeah, in some ways I have a little different thought. I want all of that as well. My focus over the past few weeks, though, has been, I think the church, it's so healthy that we've had to ask, what is the church outside of the sermon or the service? I think that's something that I've wanted from church for a very long time. And I like that we're being forced to think about this. So I want two things. Number one, I want us to be a thriving church outside the service. And I almost think that that's more important than the service. What are we doing in our communities, or, how are we reaching out, even if it's just digitally or, some way, how are we connecting with people going through this crisis? And then, how are people finding out about it? Those are kind of the priority things for me. The Oregon Conference, there's been, there are a lot of churches struggling. I think all churches are struggling, but there's been so many creative ways that the church here has actually ministered to the community, whether it's through food banks or, going grocery shopping for seniors, or, developing whole new, local church podcasts or whatever it is. I think that being involved, number one, but then sharing that we're involved, and for people to be able to come across and they're like, okay, what is the Seventh-day Adventist? Instead of just finding theology, they're finding, okay, a Seventh-day Adventist believes this, but they are this, right? In my community, the Seventh-day Adventists are the ones who fed people who are hungry. In my community, the Seventh-day Adventists were the safe place for us to call when we had no one else to call. In my community, this is what the Seventh-day Adventists are. And to some degree, like, I can relate to that thought with the LDS Church. We've talked with a couple for projects, but I also have a couple of missionaries here in Gladstone that I talked with a couple weeks ago. And just finding out the amount of community service that they do, volunteering, helping people with yard work and moving and all kinds of things, left me with an impression that, okay, my beliefs are wildly different from them, but these are people that are making a good impact in my community. Regardless of where we fall theologically, I have an impression of them that when I hear that word now, I don't think negative things, at least entirely, but I do think like, okay, but they are doing this, and I really respect that. And that's what I want for Adventism, is that when people hear the word Seventh-day Adventist, they have an association that we've done something good, right? That we are there and friends to the community and an integral part of the community. And so that's what I hope. I hope that we are able to package that digitally for people to find, and become a regular resource like this. And, I think having this time where church service is so limited and programming is so limited that it's actually forcing us to develop areas that have been underdeveloped for a lot of local churches, I think is so healthy. And I hope that inspires us in the next decade or foreseeable future to really grow that area of what church means.
Awesome. I really appreciate the time you guys have spent. So Kaleb Eisele, Justin Khoe, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your positivity and not kind of dwelling on the negative, I suppose, past experience that we might have had with people who are more in that creative space as well. And just, all right, let's get our hands dirty and get to work, and assist the best we can. So thank you both for your time. It's been a rich conversation. I'm super excited for what we've discussed and also for perhaps discussions in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it.
Oh my word. How good was that conversation? I tell you what, I had a discussion with them for probably about 10 minutes prior to recording. I recorded for about 50 minutes and I could have kept going for probably another hour. It was such an exciting time for me, such a good discussion, such an interesting topic to look at as we look at what church and ministry looks like in the current era and potentially what it could look like as we move forward into whatever our new normal might settle to be. But for now, thanks again for watching. May you continue to have conversations and may you grow in Christ through them.